For the first time in 15 years, Google felt fear. Not the kind of fear you can measure in numbers or charts, but the quiet, electric kind that ripples through an empire when it realizes someone has breached its walls. For over a decade, Google Chrome had been more than a browser. It was the air the internet breathed, the lens through which billions saw the world. Every click, every search, every moment of curiosity passed through its gates. Governments debated freedom of speech. Google already controlled the microphone. The digital kingdom seemed untouchable, a trillion-dollar fortress built on algorithms and ads, convenience and control. People didn't choose Chrome anymore, they simply lived inside it. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, something extraordinary happened. OpenAI, the insurgent, the dreamer, the architect of ChatGPT, fired its first real shot. Its name was Atlas. In a single announcement, Silicon Valley's pulse skipped. Screens glowed with disbelief. Stock tickers flickered red. Alphabet down 1.8%. Reporters typed in a frenzy. The world's most dominant gateway to the web had just been challenged by the very intelligence it helped inspire. Atlas wasn't just another browser. It learned, it summarized, searched, shocked, wrote, and reasoned, as if the web itself had finally grown a mind. For the first time, users didn't have to hunt for answers. The answers would come to them. Somewhere in Mountain View, a boardroom went silent. The empire that once promised to organize the world's information was now watching another organize itself. And in that moment, a strange new balance formed, like dawn rising beside a tired sun. The Atlas logo shimmered across screens, a glowing orb rotating softly, alive. It didn't roar with power, it whispered with confidence. Analysts called it competition. Historians may call it revolution. Because when technology stops serving one master and starts serving everyone, the internet begins to remember what it was meant to be. Free, open, unpredictable. But behind the shiny demo and viral headlines, Atlas hides something that could rewrite the internet's power map forever. When curiosity becomes control. Before Atlas, there was ChatGPT, the digital oracle that reshaped how the world asked questions. In less than 3 years, it reached 800 million users, turning late-night searches into whispered conversations with an artificial mind. It didn't just answer, it understood. It didn't just inform, it connected. For millions, especially immigrants, dreamers, and thinkers scattered across continents, ChatGPT became a bridge between languages, between knowledge, between worlds. But every revolution births resistance, and in the shadows of this new dawn stood a colossus, Google. With Chrome gripping 72% of the world's browsers, it wasn't just a company, it was infrastructure, a monopoly disguised as a choice. Its power came not from code, but from the invisible currency of the modern age, data. Every scroll, every hesitation, every heartbeat of curiosity was measured, packaged, and sold. Billions of human impulses turned into digital gold. For years, users accepted it. Ads became background noise, convenience the trade-off. We stopped asking who owned a web because the answer seemed obvious. But then came OpenAI's question, simple yet subversive. What if the browser served you, not the other way around? That question turned into software. It didn't wait for you to search, it anticipated. It didn't bombard you with ads, it simplified. It didn't track you, it worked for you. In demos, it read an article in seconds, distilled its meaning, and spoke it back with the calm tone of a friend. It compared prices across websites, booked trips, filled forms, not as a tool, but as an agent, a digital mind acting on behalf of its human. And that's where the tremor began. Because if Atlas could make decisions, if it could navigate and purchase without you, what happened to Google's entire model? The clicks, the ads, the attention economy it ruled for decades. When a browser becomes intelligent, curiosity itself becomes a form of control. The irony was poetic. The company that once vowed to organize the world's information now watched another organize itself. For Google, every ad skipped, every search avoided, every user who stayed inside Atlas meant another crack in the empire's foundation. Analysts framed it as competition,
But insiders whispered something darker, a paradigm shift. Atlas wasn't just building a browser, it was building a world where the interface between human and machine disappeared, where your intent became action instantly, where curiosity didn't travel through ads, it acted. And that, perhaps, was the true threat, because whoever controls curiosity controls civilization itself. Imagine a future where Atlas not only knows what you're looking for, but what you meant to find. The difference between a search engine and an understanding engine. The line between assistant and authority blurs. Every convenience, every automation becomes a quiet exchange of power. To the average user, Atlas feels liberating. To Silicon Valley, it feels destabilizing. A new question echoes through boardrooms and headlines alike. If curiosity itself can be automated, who really owns the mind behind the screen? And as the world began to test this new frontier, one unsettling truth began to surface. Freedom in the digital age isn't about what you can search. It's about who decides what you see when you stop searching. And when Atlas began making choices for users, Silicon Valley's quiet rivalry turned into a silent panic. Google, the reluctant titan. Every empire begins with a dream. For Google, it started in a cluttered Stanford dorm room. 2 students, a shared obsession, and a promise to organize the world's information. It sounded noble. It was noble. In those early years, Google wasn't a corporation. It was a cause, a digital librarian for humanity, archiving chaos into clarity. Each search result felt like magic, a glimpse of a future where information was free and truth was just one click away. But as with all revolutions, the dream evolved, and so did the ambition behind it. The more information Google organized, the more it began to realize the true currency of the 21st century wasn't knowledge, it was attention. And attention, unlike information, could be monetized. The transformation was subtle at first. Search became advertising. Relevance became persuasion. The clean white homepage that once felt like a window to the world slowly turned into a mirror, reflecting back not truth, but what we were most likely to click. Google no longer just showed us what we wanted to see. It learned to shape what we wanted. By the time Chrome arrived in 2008, the empire was complete. Chrome wasn't just a browser, it was the gatekeeper of modern existence. Every login, every bookmark, every form autofill fed the machine. Through convenience came compliance. Through optimization came ownership. The web was no longer a frontier, it was a product. And yet the irony was almost poetic. Google, the company that democratized the internet, had become the very hierarchy it once defied. Its mantra, "Don't be evil," hung in corporate hallways like a relic of an innocence long outgrown. Behind the scenes, algorithms replaced ethics. Every scroll through YouTube, every email scanned by Gmail, every map route suggested by Google Maps, all of it fed into a massive behavioral engine. The same technology that predicted your next word began to predict your next desire. Ads became invisible whispers in your digital ear, shaping consumption, emotion, even ideology. Then came the backlash: antitrust hearings, privacy scandals, lawmakers grilling executives who spoke in careful circles. "We don't sell your data," they'd say. Technically true, strategically misleading. Because Google didn't need to sell it, it simply sold you. In 2023, whispers turned to war drums. The US government accused Google of maintaining an illegal monopoly, paying billions to make it search the default across phones and browsers. The evidence was damning, but the outcome predictable. By September 2025, Judge Amit Mehta ruled that Google would not have to sell Chrome. It could keep its kingdom intact. The courtroom victory was hailed as legal vindication. But behind closed doors, executives exhaled relief, not pride. They had survived another rebellion. Still, survival came at a cost. Inside the company, the culture that once thrived on risk and reinvention began to fossilize. Innovation became cautious. Engineers became managers of maintenance,
not creators of change. The same system that once rewarded curiosity now punished dissent. Google had become the bureaucratic monarch of the digital world, too big to fall, too scared to evolve.
And perhaps that's what makes this story tragic rather than villainous. Google didn't wake up one day and decide to dominate the web. It simply followed its logic to the end. Growth became addiction. Data became doctrine. And when power becomes habitual, even the most brilliant minds forget why they started. In a world that once worshipped innovation, Google now represented stagnation, an empire so secure it mistook comfort for destiny. Meanwhile, outside its glass walls, the world was changing faster than its algorithms could keep up. New generations weren't searching, they were conversing. They didn't want 10 blue links. They wanted meaning, immediacy, a voice that listened back. And for the first time, Google's colossal machinery looked old. Because beneath the glossy press statements and annual AI keynotes, Google's greatest fear wasn't competition, it was irrelevance. The titan that once defined the internet was now trapped by its own gravity. Too large to pivot, too invested to simplify, too proud to admit that the age of the search bar was fading. And so, when OpenAI stepped onto the battlefield with Atlas, sleek, conversational, alive, Google's silence said everything. For all its power, it had forgotten how to inspire. Empires rarely fall to outsiders. They crumble from within, from blindness, from inertia, from the quiet arrogance of believing they'll last forever. But every empire forgets. Revolutions don't begin with armies, they begin with an idea and a single spark. Sam Altman's Counter-Strike. The year was 2022, and the world stopped scrolling. For the first time in decades, a new kind of intelligence had entered the conversation. ChatGPT wasn't just a product, it was a portal, one that spoke, reasoned, and wondered. The internet, once a battlefield of ads and algorithms, suddenly had a voice that sounded human. At the center stood Sam Altman, an enigma in a gray hoodie and quiet confidence. While the tech giants raced to dominance, he spoke of stewardship. AI should empower humanity, not entrap it, he told a restless crowd in San Francisco. To some, it sounded naive, to others, revolutionary. Altman wasn't building for clicks or capital, he was building a counterweight. In a digital age ruled by data empires, he offered a new kind of freedom, intelligence that served, not surveilled. His calm stood against chaos, his conviction against convenience. And when he whispered that the next frontier wasn't search, but understanding, even Google took notice. This wasn't rebellion, it was recalibration. A promise written not in code, but in conscience. And this week, that philosophy turned into code, and a browser called Atlas. The demo that broke the silence. The lights dimmed, a single monitor glowed on stage, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Sam Altman stood still, voice steady. "Atlas," he said, "find me a pasta recipe." Within seconds, the browser responded. No tabs, no ads, no distractions, just clarity. "Here's one you might love," Atlas replied, highlighting the recipe in soft luminescent text. Then, without another command, it opened Instacart, tallied the ingredients, compared prices, and filled the cart. The crowd froze. Developers leaned forward, their faces lit by the glow of the impossible. A system that didn't just search, it acted. Investors stared at each other, eyes wide, calculating futures and fears. On stage, the silence stretched until the confirmation ping echoed through the hall. Order complete. It was more than a demo. It was defiance. The death of clicks, the end of middlemen, the unraveling of a trillion-dollar web built on friction. Somewhere in Mountain View, analysts refreshed dashboards. Traffic projections dipped. Ad forecasts trembled. Because if Atlas could bypass everything, who would need the old web at all? Applause erupted, but the applause wasn't for technology, it was for liberation. the first glimpse of an internet that worked for people again. But the real shock wasn't what Atlas could do, it was what it threatened to end. Atlas versus Chrome. The headlines hit like aftershocks. Atlas declares war on Chrome. What began as a product launch had become a manifesto. Atlas didn't just browse, it belonged to you. It remembered your needs, not your clicks. It acted on intention, not impulse. It was the first digital ally in a landscape of predators, and standing across from it, the old guard, Chrome. Polished, powerful, and perfectly profitable. Where Chrome sells your attention, Atlas earns your trust. Where Chrome watches what you want, Atlas asks how it can help. Where Chrome sees you as data, Atlas sees you as the reason data exists. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. Markets convulsed. Alphabet stock slipped another 3%. Ad giants whispered of collapse. Every banner, every tracker, every algorithmic auction suddenly looked fragile. Analysts warned of a new Cold War, not between nations, but between philosophies, one built on exploitation, the other on empowerment. And the crowd online knew it too. Finally, a browser that doesn't treat me like inventory. And in that shift, from user to human, something irreversible began. Chrome's reflection started to crack. And as Google's empire scrambled to respond, one question echoed across Silicon Valley. What happens when the gatekeeper loses the keys? The internet reacts. The morning after the demo, the internet didn't wake up, it detonated. YouTubers flooded feeds with thumbnails of wide-eyed astonishment. Atlas just changed everything. Tech analysts dissected every frame of the launch video like detectives studying evidence. On X, memes trended globally. Chrome's logo fading into dust. Atlas crowned with digital light. Goodbye, Chrome. You served the algorithm well. Developers cheered the arrival of agent mode, calling it the first true leap since the smartphone. This isn't browsing, it's delegation. Meanwhile, advertisers scrambled in boardrooms, whispering about vanishing data streams and dying clicks. The old web economy was cracking in real time, and the sound was deafening. TikTokers reenacted the demo. Journalists called it a paradigm shift. Everyone, everywhere was talking about Atlas, not as software, but as symbol. And yet beneath the noise and celebration, unease began to ripple through the same feeds that crowned it hero. Because if Atlas could act for you, it could also act instead of you. But amid the chaos and excitement, a deeper question emerged. Is this the dawn of liberation or the start of a new kind of surveillance? Freedom versus convenience. In the quiet after the storm, the question lingered. What do we really want from our machines? Freedom or convenience? Atlas didn't arrive to conquer. It arrived to reveal, to hold a mirror to a civilization addicted to ease, yet yearning for autonomy. It asked us to look at ourselves, at the millions of clicks traded for comfort, the hours surrendered to algorithms disguised as help. But every empire falls, not when it's defeated, but when people stop believing in its control. For years we worshipped at the altar of seamlessness, mistaking frictionless for free. But maybe true progress isn't about what the machine can do for us. It's about what it reminds us to reclaim within us. In this moment between fear and faith, between data and destiny, humanity stands at a threshold. One path leads to dependence, the other to autonomy. And as the screens glow softly in the night, a whisper moves through the digital wind, a reminder that power, once questioned, can never again be absolute. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of the browser war, but the rebirth of the free web, the dawn of Atlas. And so the dawn of Atlas rises, a new light against a long, unbroken sky of dominance. For the first time, Google's empire meets its match. not in force, but in imagination. The web shifts, the silence breaks, and the rules of discovery are rewritten. The future won't be searched, it'll be spoken. So tell us, do you trust AI to guide your world, or do you still hold the keys to your own curiosity? As the heartbeat slows and the screen fades to black, the question remains, waiting for your answer.